All types of phobias explained. Let's get right into it. Number 1. Specific phobias. You know that feeling when you're on a roller coaster, gripping the seat like it's your last lifeline, heart pounding, and all you can think is, why on earth am I doing this? Well, that's what it feels like for someone with a specific phobia. Except, they get that reaction in response to something much less thrilling than a roller coaster, like, say, a button or a paperclip. A specific phobia is a persistent, excessive fear of a specific object or situation. It's not just that you're mildly uncomfortable with something. It's an intense, irrational fear that can make you break into a cold sweat at the thought of encountering it. These phobias can range from the relatively common, like a fear of spiders, which, let's face it, is a pretty reasonable fear when they decide to hang out on your ceiling at 2 a.m., to the much more unusual, like a fear of balloons. Yes, that's a thing. Balloons, with their bright colors and all the fun of popping them, have made it onto the phobia list. Now, this doesn't just mean someone's afraid of balloons for a moment. It's an all-consuming dread that affects their daily life. Imagine being invited to a birthday party, and instead of joy, you're consumed by panic because there's a balloon in the corner. That's the reality for people with specific phobias. They might go to great lengths to avoid the object of their fear, and when avoidance isn't possible, they can experience anxiety that interferes with their social and work lives. So, while you may just feel a bit nervous about that spider in the corner, remember, there are people out there whose fear is much more profound, often needing therapy or even exposure treatments to help them manage their response. It's a fascinating mix of the mind's protective instincts, and sometimes its overactive imagination. Number 2. Social phobias. Have you ever had that moment when you're walking into a room full of people and suddenly, all eyes feel like they're glued to you? Your palms get sweaty, your heart races, and you can't decide if you should run out of the room or just curl into a ball. Welcome to the world of social phobia, or social anxiety disorder, where the thought of being judged or scrutinized by others becomes so intense that it can stop you in your tracks. Social phobias aren't just about a little stage fright or being nervous before a big presentation. Oh no. They're about the constant, overwhelming fear of social interactions. You know, like talking to strangers at the grocery store, making eye contact during a meeting, or heaven forbid saying something awkward at a party. The anxiety is not just about the discomfort of the moment, it's about worrying that people will think less of you. This can lead to a tendency to avoid social situations altogether, which in turn can make things even worse, because now you're avoiding practice and exposure to the situations that would help you build confidence. Imagine if you couldn't even grab a cup of coffee at your favorite cafe without feeling like everyone there is judging your choice of beverage, or wondering why you're not smiling as much as everyone else. That's social phobia. In a nutshell, feeling completely out of place and vulnerable, even in the most everyday interactions. This can have a real impact on a person's life. The fear of embarrassment or being judged might make them shy away from new opportunities, friendships, or even their career growth. But don't worry, treatment is available, including therapy and sometimes medication, to help those affected live more freely and comfortably in social situations. Number 3. Agoraphobia. Now, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood phobias out there. Agoraphobia. If you've ever avoided going to a store because it was a bit crowded or felt trapped in a situation, you may have brushed up against the feeling of agoraphobia. But for those with this condition, it's a much more serious matter. Agoraphobia is essentially the fear of being in situations where escape might be difficult or help unavailable in the event of a panic attack. This could include being in crowded places, open spaces, or even just being far from home. For some, it's about being in a large shopping mall or taking public transportation. For others, it could even mean avoiding leaving the house altogether. What makes agoraphobia particularly tricky is that it can become a cycle. Someone with this phobia might avoid a place once, and the avoidance actually reinforces their fear. The more they avoid the places that make them anxious, the harder it is to break the cycle. You might think of it like trying to fight fire with fire. Avoiding the thing that scares you only strengthens the fear. The good news is that treatment for agoraphobia often includes exposure therapy, where people are gradually exposed to the things they fear in a controlled, supportive way. With time and patience, people with agoraphobia can regain their confidence and ability to move freely through the world again. Number 4. Animal phobias. Next up, let's talk about the classic phobia that just about everyone can relate to: animal phobias. Picture this. You're walking down the street, and out of nowhere, a cat comes darting towards you. What do? If you're anything like a lot of people with an animal phobia, you might freeze in place, convinced that this animal is out to get you. Animal phobias are among the most common types of specific phobias, and they're not just limited to cats and dogs. People can develop intense fears of all sorts of creatures, from snakes, hello, Indiana Jones, to birds, insects, and even rodents. In fact, rats, mice, and cockroaches are frequently cited as some of the most feared creatures. Why? Because for many, these animals symbolize something dirty, unpredictable, or simply gross. But what exactly makes someone afraid of an animal? Sometimes it's because of a past traumatic experience, like getting bitten by a dog or having a close call with a bird. Other times, it's a learned fear passed down from parents or peers. When these fears start to interfere with a person's daily life, it becomes a full-blown phobia, and things like walking in a park or traveling to certain places can trigger panic attacks. Animal phobias are also particularly challenging because, well, animals are everywhere. You can't just avoid the neighborhood squirrel forever. But fear not, folks, just like other phobias, exposure therapy, where you gradually come into contact with the feared animal in a controlled environment, can help people overcome their irrational fears. Number 5. Natural environment phobias. Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a beautiful, scenic cliff. The wind is blowing, and you can see the whole valley stretching out beneath you. It's peaceful, right? Well, for some people, this breathtaking view is enough to trigger a full-on panic attack. And that's the reality for those with natural environment phobias. These phobias involve a fear of natural elements, such as heights, water, storms, or even the vastness of the ocean. If you've ever looked at a massive thunderstorm and felt the tiniest twinge of unease, you can probably relate to the basic idea behind this type of phobia. But for someone with a natural environment phobia, that unease is turned up to 11. Imagine a person who can't stand being on a boat because of the fear of water, thalassophobia, or someone who has to avoid hiking or even flying because of their fear of heights, acrophobia. It's not just a minor discomfort, it's a deep-seated fear that can restrict their life in significant ways. The interesting thing about natural environment phobias is that they are often triggered by something completely out of our control, like a storm or being at a great height. So, unlike animal phobias, where the fear may be associated with a specific creature, natural environment phobias are about the environment itself. Something much bigger, more intimidating, and less predictable. Treatment for these phobias often involves gradual exposure to the feared natural element in a safe and controlled way, helping people reframe their fear and understand that not every storm is going to swallow them whole or every tall building is about to collapse. Number 6. Situational phobias. Now, let's take a dive into situational phobias. These are the phobias triggered by specific situations, things that can happen on a daily basis but are enough to send someone into a panic. This could be something like the fear of flying, aviophobia, the fear of being in an elevator, claustrophobia, or the fear of driving on highways, vehophobia. For someone with a situational phobia, the anticipation of being in a specific situation is enough to cause extreme anxiety. Take, for instance, the fear of flying. A person with this phobia might avoid getting on a plane at all costs, even if they really need to travel. The thought of being in a confined space with no escape, thousands of feet above the ground, sets off a massive fear response. Similarly, someone with claustrophobia might avoid elevators or small spaces, simply because the thought of being enclosed can trigger feelings of helplessness or panic. What's tricky about situational phobias is that they're tied to specific triggers. These triggers are often unavoidable if you want to lead a normal life. So, while you might just skip the elevator and take the stairs for a little extra exercise, someone with a more intense form of situational phobia might find it far more difficult. Something as simple as being in a tight space can make them feel trapped. Fortunately, treatment options like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and exposure therapy can help individuals desensitize themselves to their triggers allowing them to slowly regain control over the situations that cause them stress. Number 7. Medical and bodily phobias. All right, time to get a little personal. Let's talk about medical and bodily phobias. These are the phobias related to a person's health, body, and medical treatments. We're talking about things like fear of injections, trypanophobia, fear of doctors or hospitals, iatrophobia, or even a more generalized fear of illness or bodily functions, nosophobia. For some, the mere thought of getting a needle stuck in their arm is enough to send them into a spiral of dread. You know that feeling when you see a needle and your body tenses up as if it's trying to escape? For people with trypanophobia, that's not just a quick reaction. It's a full-on panic attack. The sight of a syringe can make them break out in a cold sweat or even faint. It's not about being just a little squeamish. It's about a deep, irrational fear of something that most of us know is a routine part of life. Similarly, people who have iatrophobia might avoid going to the doctor altogether, even if they're feeling ill. The fear of being diagnosed with something serious or having a procedure done can become so overwhelming that it prevents them from seeking necessary medical help. Now, here's where things get interesting. Medical and bodily phobias are often tied to feelings of vulnerability or lack of control. For many, medical situations are inherently anxiety-inducing because they represent a lack of autonomy over your body and health. The good news is that, just like other phobias, treatment can help. Exposure therapy and cognitive techniques are often used to help people face their fears, one small step at a time. Number 8. Unusual rare phobias. Okay, now let's get a little quirky. Let's talk about some of the rarer phobias out there. You might think, phobias are just about the usual suspects, like spiders and heights. But trust me, there are some truly bizarre fears out there. From fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth. Yes, that's a real thing. And it's called Agoraphobia, to fear of long words. Yes, that's ironically called hippopotamonstroSquipedaliophobia. The world of rare phobias is both fascinating and, in some cases, downright hilarious. One of the most unusual phobias is nomophobia, the fear of being without your mobile phone. It's like your entire world is falling apart if you don't have your phone in your hand at all times. Imagine the stress when your phone's battery dies and you realize you're alone in the wilderness without Google Maps. That's nomophobia in action. Another one that's less common but still real is trypophobia, the fear of clusters of small holes. It's not the holes themselves but the way they look. Think of a honeycomb or a lotus seed pod. Just the sight of these objects can cause a sense of revulsion or even panic in people with this condition. You'd think this is something people could laugh off, but for some, it's a very real, very distressing fear. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.